Okay, thanks, Bart. I'm gonna just wheel this a little bit over here, I guess, maybe. Or maybe like this, I don't know. I gotta get comfortable here. Normally, can you hear me okay? Got to get it closer. Can you hear me now? Is that better? Okay, good. So I am happy to be here. Thanks, Bart, for inviting me. I did present on AI to a SERS group, Seniors in Retirement, that Bart belongs to, and I think it went pretty well. The most enjoyable part to me was, and I didn't expect this actually, although I should have, because I've spoken to SERS before. I know there's a lot of engineers and scientists from Silicon Valley here in the audience, and the questions I got were just fantastic. So not to put any pressure on you, but I'm partly here because I'm really curious what you think about artificial intelligence. Now, as I was sitting here waiting to talk, Les told me about the tragedy of exclusion. And so I brought up ChatGPT, which is the one of the AIs we'll be talking about today. And I thought it would be, Les was also telling me about operas and a few other things. So I thought we would ask ChatGPT to write an opera. And I'm gonna have to put down my mic for a minute because I have a title for the opera, and who knows what it'll come up with. I don't want to drop the mic, but let's get over here and let's call title the opera the tragedy. Tragedy, I can see, I don't know how to spell of exclusion. And I hope there are some women watching the Zoom, and I hope you record. It's okay to record the Zoom, and you can share it with the women, because I have a wife, and she would be pounding the floor if she got excluded from the talk. Can you read that for us? Let's try to make it bigger. All right. Okay. Oh. Title the opera. I guess I better spell that correctly. Although ChatGPT doesn't seem to care. You can have spelling errors in it. It still gets it pretty well. Oh, yeah, it's okay. So here, did you see how long it took before it started? Like 0 time. It just starts pumping out text. And can't read that fast. I'll scroll back and we'll just read a little bit of it. But okay, so it's done. And now I could say, oh, I don't like this part, make this part better. But I just wanted you to see how fast AI is at doing things like writing poetry, writing, the outline for an opera. So here's Act 1, introduction, the terraces of Los Gatos retirement community, Silicon Valley. The opera opens with the serene and picturesque landscape of the terraces of Los Gatos. The residents, mostly retirees with engineering backgrounds, are seen going about their daily routines. The atmosphere is buzzing with intelligence and curiosity, yet a subtle air of exclusion lingers. Scene 2, the community center. As the residents gather in the community center, we meet the central characters. Harold, an elderly engineer, and Emily, a retired computer scientist. Both have felt isolated from the community due to their differing interests and lack of connection. They share their grievances, expressing their longing for inclusion and understanding. Act 2, the struggle for acceptance. Scene 1, the community garden. The stage transforms into a vibrant community garden, symbolizing growth and potential. Harold and Emily encounter a group of retirees engaged in a lively conversation about their hobbies and interests. However, when Harold and Emily approach, their attempts to join the conversation are met with indifference and subtle exclusion. They are left feeling even more isolated and disheartened. The technology lab. Now I'm going to not read this whole thing, but like I say, I could go back and say, well, I don't like Harold's not the right name. Change it to this. And it would regenerate an opera, an outline of an opera with different components. But let me go into my presentation here and I'll get started. Where is the right button? There we go. There we go. Okay, so I'll give a little bit of a talk on AI past, present, and future. And normally what I do, and I'm going to spare you this when I give a talk on AI, is I show a little YouTube of robots dancing. And if you haven't seen this YouTube, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. But the reason I show this YouTube is, as amazing as robotics and AI are today, humans are still superior in numerous ways. And as engineers, I'm going to give you a big way in a few slides. But just keep in mind, there's so much special about people that that are millions of times better than AI. I want to make that point at the beginning, and I'll make that point. So today's talk, I'm going to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence and where that term comes from, and a little bit of the history. But I also want to share with you why so many young, bright people are dedicating their lives to building artificial intelligence, in spite of all of the Terminator science fictions and all the scary stuff out there about artificial intelligence. The motivating factor for a lot of young, bright people, including myself, when I was younger, I've retired from IBM 2 years ago, so I'm a little bit older, but we wanted to solve artificial intelligence because we wanted help solving all other problems: homelessness, poverty, all of these other problems. This is truly the motivating factor for a lot of people working on artificial intelligence. There's this little cartoon here. We shouldn't be exploring the other planets until we've solved all the problems here on Earth. I'm sure some of you have heard that. And we could rephrase it. We shouldn't be exploring artificial intelligence until we've solved all our problems here on Earth. Sounds reasonable. So what's the timeline for solving all problems? 10 years, 15 years. And I'm a very optimistic person. And by the end of this talk, I hope you'll share a little bit of my optimism for AI. So this is a brief history. I have to say up front, my life is connected in a weird way to AI, because I was conceived in 1955, just about the time the Dartmouth Workshop proposal was being created. I was born in 1956, the year of the Dartmouth proposal. John McCarthy was one of the primary authors of that workshop proposal. Marvin Minsky of MIT was another author of that proposal. No joke, my very first day that I started at IBM Almaden, where Les, you worked up there on the hill, the very, very first day I started at IBM, this old guy walks into my office and says, "You must be Jim Sporer. They tell me I'm going to be reporting to you now." And I looked at him and I said, "You look really familiar." And he said, "Well, I know you have an AI background, so you've probably heard of me. I'm John McCarthy." And I go, "What? John McCarthy's going to be reporting to me at IBM?" And sure enough, it was John McCarthy. Marvin Minsky was my one of my professors at MIT. I didn't really know Claude Shannon at Bell Labs, but Nathan Rochester at IBM was one of the 4 people who created that very, very first artificial intelligence conference. Now, the interesting thing about AI is it goes through winters of despair and doubt, where, oh, we're not making much progress. And then it goes through summers of enthusiasm and hype. We're currently in the biggest summer of enthusiasm and hype about AI that I've seen in my career. But I'd like you to remember in 1997, IBM created Deep Blue. That was another interesting time. And probably in 2011, many of you remember when IBM created Watson, and it went on to win that game show. For those who are interested, and I know some of you are scientists and engineers, so some of you may be interested. If you go down this list, these are some of the other important things that got us to where we are today. AlphaGo, Google's DeepMinds in 2016. That was really interesting because that program actually didn't just play Go, which is a very complex game, better than any person, but it also taught itself how to play. So as you get into these later AIs, not only do they play the games better than people, they teach themselves how to play. So they can play billions or trillions of examples of games and learn from those. All you need is attention. Google made a major breakthrough in 2017 with its transformer architecture. And just to keep it simple, that was when AI got a working memory. We humans have working memories. We can remember 7 plus or minus 2 things, but that was when AI got its working memory. I won't go through AlphaFold, but that's AI has been applied to protein folding for science advancements. And then we get into the DALL-E and ChatGPT era with generative AI. And I will explain in really, really simple terms how these systems work right now, because I think it helps to understand what generative AI is doing, because it's really so simple that we were doing it back in the 70s. Back in the 70s, when I graduated from MIT, I went to an AI startup company, and we were doing speech recognition, building mathematical models. And the difference between then and now is today, the amount of computational power we have is orders and orders of magnitude greater. We've got much more compute power, and we have much more data. But a lot of the techniques that are being used today, early versions of those we knew about in the 1970s. I was studying Geoffrey Hinton's work in the 1970s when I was working at this startup company. So we knew about the techniques, but we didn't have the data until now. And basically the way you can think of this generative AI is working. You'll notice when I typed in that opera thing, that it just started typing words. That's because it didn't have to reflect, oh, I want a big picture of an opera. I've got to think about it, plan it out. The way it works is it's just putting out a high probability word. That's all it's doing. It's just based on the history so far, the prompt I gave it, it's putting out the next word. In the 1970s, we had a phrase for this. We called it monkeys at the typewriter. And if you know the story, if you line up 1 million typewriters with 1 million monkeys, and the monkeys are banging away at the keys randomly, and you go along and you had the time to look at all of those things that it types, there would be a Shakespeare play out there after 1,000 years or so. What we've done now is we've started making the probabilities better by all this data and compute. So you could imagine if you're just randomly hitting keys on a keyboard, it would take a long time to even get a word. But let's say we change the keyboard. Let's change the typewriter. Now we take TH, instead of just being a T and an H key separately, let's make a TH key and make it really big, because the word the appears a lot. And the HE key is big. So this is what's called bigram statistics. Now you're typing 2 letters at a time. Well, what if you did 3 letters at a time? Now suddenly the monkeys are creating a lot more words. The probabilities are getting better. Now imagine training it up, not with trigrams, but with something that can do tens of thousands of words on every bit of text that's ever been created on the internet. The probabilities start getting really, really good. And I don't know who is most surprised by this. Probably these AI engineers at Google and OpenMind, when they go, what the heck is happening? this is pretty good. In fact, you probably heard one Google engineer got fired because he said, this thing is conscious. This thing is conscious. Now at MIT, when I was going to MIT, one of my professors who wasn't here, his name was Joseph Weizenbaum, and he created a very, very famous program. I'm just wondering how many of you have heard of it. It was called ELIZA. I see one hand go up. ELIZA was a program. It was just about maybe 2 pages of Lisp code, so it was a really short program. And you type in, it would say, tell me about yourself. And you'd type into it. And what it did is it just had clever rules for changing, spinning the words around. But there were people who actually played with ELIZA and thought it was a real person. And so it's not surprising that when you have enough computing power and you train something up on all the data, that it gets really, really good at generating things that it's seen gazillions of, operas, poems. The thing that I was most impressed with ChatGPT, and I'll get to some other slides in a minute, was how good it was at doing point of view. So if I said, write a poem about this, like Shakespeare might write it, or Emily Dickinson, or someone else, Edgar Allan Poe, it would be in that style because it's biased the probabilities to be things that are high probability likely to be generated. Sure. Go ahead and ask a question. Did somebody want to ask a question? Oh, all right. I'm going to move on. By the 1955 standards, AI is solved. By 1955 standards, you can't really read it because it's small, but it says they want to create a kind of computer that can solve some of the problems reserved for humans. It's going to have, they're going to use automatic computers. They're going to teach it to use language. You've just seen ChatGPT. Yeah, computers can do pretty good at language. Neural nets. Yeah, it's based on a neural network architecture. And it's got a theory of size of computation. Well, if you know anything about AI, they're trying to build bigger and bigger and bigger models. They're trying to fit more and more data. So by 1955 standards, AI is solved. If you read through this proposal, they thought they were going to have this done that summer. That's how optimistic they were. Took 67.5 years later, and they're done. So as you hear all of this hype about AI, be a little bit skeptical because it is amazing. It's impressive, but it's imperfect. And I'll get into how it's imperfect in a minute here. There's 3 stages of AI. Through most of my career, we were dealing with narrow AI. Now we're getting into broad AI, AI that can do many things. And you'll hear the hype is all about artificial general intelligence, an AI that can do everything that a person can in terms of computational tasks. But take a look at this machine. A couple years ago, this was the largest supercomputer in the world. And there's bigger ones now, but this was the Summit supercomputer. And it takes 13 megawatts of power. It's a good sized computer. It would not fit in this room. It would take several rooms this size, and it uses a lot of power, 13 megawatts. That's the power of a smallish little town. To do, at the time, not quite a billion instructions per second. A billion instructions per second. Okay, but it takes 13 megawatts. Your brain, the brain in each of us, is doing about an exascale, a billion instructions per second on 20 watts of power, about 1 million times less power. So again, if you look at those, I didn't show you the video, but some of you may have seen that video of the robot dancing. That robot can dance for about an hour and then it's out of power. And then you have to recharge those batteries for about 8 to 12 hours. So there's many other dimensions I could talk about human advantage over technology, but just on power alone, and I don't think this is an easy problem to solve. even with AI helping us, I don't think we're going to have this solved in 10 years or 20 years. 30 years, yes. 40 years, absolutely. I think in 40 years, we will have an exascale system that can operate at about 20 watts. And I'll show you why I believe that in a minute. But this is just one of many dimensions I could talk to you about why humans have an enormous advantage over artificial intelligence. Human method of computation has enormous advantages over artificial intelligence. Now, just like a calculator is great for doing certain things, there are places where AI has advantages over us, huge advantages. And we'll talk about that as well. So I had to give this talk at the SIRS a while ago. I asked ChatGPT to generate a song because the SIRS like to sing songs. So it came up with a song, AI, enhancing the way personalization brightens each day with tailored recommendations. It's clear SIRS members' interests AI hold dear. And then I said to ChatGPT, give me a prompt that I can take over to your brother DALL-E, because DALL-E takes text and turns it into pictures. That will be a nice picture of that song you just wrote for me. And so ChatGPT, like that, generates a prompt. I take it over to DALL-E, and it generated 4 images of retiree types singing, and that's one I like best, so I selected that one. But that took me 5 minutes. It took me 5 minutes to write a, it was a pretty good song, actually. It had some good parts, and generate a picture. So some people feel their jobs are threatened. You probably heard not long after ChatGPT came, who went on strike? All the movie writers and screenwriters went on strike. Why? Because they could see, just like when IBM created the mainframe, and instead of needing 10,000 accountants, you could get by with 100. This technology is good enough for some things. And for creative writing, it's pretty darn good. So they went on strike because they're worried about their members. Now, I'll give you several different ways of looking at that. I'm optimistic about even that. But let me tell you one story. I have to tell you one story because I think it's true and interesting. There's actually 2 stories I'll tell. The first story is when I worked at IBM, I traveled to 45 countries for IBM. I had various jobs there. I was CTO of the venture capital group. I started their service research area. I led their university programs. I led open source AI for IBM. But when I was leading the university programs, my job was to travel to universities all over the world because IBM was hiring about 30,000 students a year for interns and other positions. And I'd meet with the university leaders and talk to them about the relationship we could have with AI, with IBM and them. And I needed a game to keep me interested because, you know, I would fly into these airports all over the world. Usually it was late at night because I was, you know, trying not to be away from my family too much. And I get into these crazy hours and a taxi driver would take me to the hotel. And that was my script. And then the taxi driver would take me back and I'd fly out. And so I invented this game. And my game was taxi drivers all over the world like to talk. And all you have to do is look in the rear view mirror. And if they make eye contact and you look up, if you look down at your book or your computer, they won't talk to you because they're polite most places. But if you make eye contact, they know that's the signal. Okay, this guy is ready to talk. And the first thing they say, where are you coming in from? And I'd say, California. Oh, California, I want to go there. I've been there, whatever. They love California all over the world. And then the next thing they would say, what do you do? And I'd say, oh, I work in technology. Ah, technology, it's great. It's going to change the world, this and that. My kid used this technology to do this, or always the same stories. And then I'd wait until there was a little pause and I'd say to the taxi driver, I saw the strangest thing the other day when I was driving to work in California. I was driving along. All of a sudden, this car passed me. It was going faster than me. And the driver was reading the newspaper. It was one of those driverless cars. What do you think about that? And you may think you know the answer, but only 50%. And I was surprised how, because I kept statistics. I'm like a scientist. I have to do these experiments and see the result. It was almost perfectly 50-50. 50%. I know this is what you're thinking. Oh, you crazy people in Silicon Valley, you're going to put me out of a job? Why do you invent these technologies that destroy jobs? But 50%. And I remember these people, some of them so well, because they weren't just a little bit excited. Oh, this is the greatest stuff. I've been following this. I remember this taxi driver in Hawaii. I've got little roads mapped out. There's these short things. If I could just get the insurance companies to give me better insurance rate on these driverless cars, I would be rich. And I remember this really young guy in Naples. He was like, oh, this is such a wonderful technology. I'll be sitting at home sipping a cappuccino with my bambino, my baby on my lap, and my beautiful wife bringing me stuff. And my fleet of driverless taxis will be delivering people all over Naples. I'll be rich. What's the difference? The difference is, do I define myself as a taxi driver who cannot change? Or do I define myself as a taxi driver who can change? That's it. It's attitude. Now, yeah, maybe there's some other things we have to change. But if you're a screenwriter and you're thinking, I'm going to be out of a job, or I'm going to be the best screenwriter in the world, I'm going to write that play that I've been having in my head that I can't quite get out, I'm going to get that thing out. I'm going to be a famous screenwriter. I'm not just going to be a hack screenwriter. So this is what this technology is. I was talking to, I think, Jim Myers, or I can't remember, one of the people here at this table, who said, I'm worried about bad actors. Absolutely. Every technology we've ever invented has bad actors and good actors. Unfortunately, I think usually the good actors are a little bit ahead or on top, but it is like whack-a-mole, because the bad actors will use it and we'll have to whack, whack, whack. But this is a very powerful technology that's going to help a lot of people, but it does have bad actors using it, and it has a lot of people who don't want to change, who have identified their identity in such a way that it's a threat to them. I get it. So how many of you saw the 60 Minutes on AI? Just curious, if you could raise your hand. Okay, most of you, good. I thought that was excellent. 60 Minutes did a fabulous job. Much better than my talk. Just go watch that. Now, some of you I know want to be really scared of AI. And that's okay too. If you want to be super scared, like so scared, you'll want to crawl under your bed. Watch Tristan Harris and Aza Raskin from the Center for Humane Technology. It's called The AI Dilemma. It's on YouTube. Watch that. I guarantee you'll be super scared of AI after watching that. Really, really scared. Now, some of you may be thinking, and now my second story. So the taxi driver one was fun. 3 days ago, my wife comes to me, Diane. She's a lawyer from Yale. I was getting my PhD in artificial intelligence, computer science at Yale. She was getting her law degree. She comes to me and she goes, just like this guy, asking me for a recommendation. I go, who? And she tells me the guy's name. Oh, but isn't he like 78 years old? And isn't he like a super famous lawyer? What does he need a recommendation letter? I'm sorry, my dear wife, you are amazing, but why does he need a recommendation? Oh, he's applying to college. He wants to get a counseling of psychology degree. And I know my wife. Anybody asks her something, she's going to do it for him. And that's probably why he asked her, because he knew he could get it on short notice. But I also know my wife is a perfectionist, and she's going to want to write the perfect recommendation letter. And she's going to struggle with this. I'm going to have to put up for days of like, and so I say, well, don't worry, just tell me a few things. And I'm in front of my computer and I'm just typing 5 or 6 things she's telling me about this guy into my computer. I bring up ChatGPT and I say, write a recommendation. And boom, it's done. And I show it to her and she goes, what? this is really good. I can just change a few sentences and I'm done. And I said, yeah, this stuff is pretty cool, isn't it? Now, if you're one of these people who really wants to start using ChatGPT and DALL-E and all these other AI tools to start a company, I want to encourage you to do that. This friend of my wife's 78 years old, and he's applying to to get a PhD in counseling psychology, and he'll be a great one, by the way. But this guy, Ethan Mollick, he writes an article for Substack. He's a UPenn professor. He every week comes out with amazing stuff that you can do with these tools. In 15 minutes, he had it create the outline for a whole company, the business plan and everything. So if you are one of these people that have writer's block, no more. If you are one of these people who have an idea, but you don't know where to get started, no more. The tools are good enough. They're not perfect, but they're good enough to have no excuse for not writing that book, not writing that play, not writing that business plan, because you got an amazing AI helper to do that. And the last thing I want to say is my antidote for being scared with AI is this guy right here. When I worked at Apple, he was my boss, Don Norman. He's quite famous for human-computer interaction, but he just wrote a book. He sent it to me before he published it, so I got a chance to read it in advance, and it's called Design for a Better World. And that's, now we're getting back to what the good actors can do with this technology to solve a lot of the world's problems. And if you need inspiration for that, I urge you to look at Don's book. And I have to say, these generative AI tools are just going to get better and better. You know, the text and writing ones are good, the image ones are good, the coding ones are getting so good. Maybe your idea, you have to write a program, but you've never written a program. Not to worry, you got help now. Videos, maybe you're thinking, well, you know, I really want to make a movie. I just want a movie. The video production generative AI tools are getting fantastic. I saw one the other day that literally brought tears to my eyes. It was about, it was made in France, and it was about kids growing up with too much social media and the peer pressure. Every image in it, every sound in it was computer generated, and a person did it on their laptop. And it brought tears to my eyes. It was so good. And the images, the people looked so real, the children. I mean, it was just crazy. Can bad actors use this? Absolutely. Will bad actors use this? Absolutely. Whack-a-mole time. We got to hit them hard and drive them down when they do, because we've got a powerful tool to help us do things. Now, this is for the engineers in the crowd, and I'm going to do this really, really quickly. But let me just say that, and if you got questions, just raise your hand or just shout them out, because I'm kind of done talking. I'll say more, but it's just coasting. If you see this picture here, draw it next time you've got like a pencil and a paper, a napkin, and you're just doodling, draw this picture, because you'll think about it. 1960, 1980, 2000, 2020. So just the horizontal's time every 20 years, vertical do 1,000, million, billion, trillion, and then draw the horizontals. You can slide this down here if you like it to be neat. So, but accuracy is slightly shifted up. This is the cost of computation. Remember when I said in the 1970s we were thinking about a lot of this stuff? We didn't have enough compute. We didn't have enough data. We didn't have enough compute, but we could see where it was going. And finally, we've got enough compute. Now, this little green guy right here is GDP per employee trend. And that's based on US historical data. It's increasing. This is an exponential chart, by the way. So this is increasing exponentially. So what all this extra computation and all this extra data does is it makes us more productive. If we want to use this to be more productive, we can use it to be more productive. And this is the trend that we're on. Here's the exascale. Remember I said we're doing a billion instructions per second in our head? When does an exascale get to $1,000? By 2060. The physics of doing an exascale on 20 watts is hard. We're not going to have AI solved, I don't believe, until about 2060. That is a Rana scale. That is a really big number, 10 to the 27th. That's the equivalent of 1 billion human brains. 1 billion human brains. So, I mean, that's a fair percentage of the population of the planet. By about 2080, there'll be people, companies, maybe governments, building AI simulated worlds with 1 billion simulated people in them. Why? Why indeed? Why would somebody? Well, if they're a bad actor, we can imagine why. But if they're a good actor, why would you want to do that? Because there's all these ideas that people have for public policy, but to try them out in the real world could cause a lot of harm. What if you could do massive simulations about public policy? What if you could try things out in a simulated world with simulated entities before you actually implement it in the real world? This is, I mean, I'm an optimistic guy, right? I'm always looking at how good actors use. When I use ChatGPT, first of all, it makes all kinds of mistakes, so you got to check it, verify. Second, the one exception I made was my wife's recommendation letter. I told her, nah, don't say ChatGPT did it, just, it's only a few sentences anyway. But normally, and I wrote 2 book chapters last week on AI, and I use ChatGPT, but I put the prompt in my paper, I put the output, and then I put a little section on, here's what I had to correct to verify it. Ethical use of these tools means that you verify and you don't pass it off as your own. So when you write that great play or that great opera, or you have that great business plan, you go into an ethical gray zone. And I'll tell you why. It's because there's going to be all kinds of lawsuits on this stuff. Did they have the right to use all the data? Artists are already saying, how dare you generate images like my pictures? Estates of whole families are saying, you can't do that. That's like what my grandfather did, all his art. And now you've ripped me off. So there's going to be enormous numbers of lawsuits. And you're going to end up in this strange situation where you're a government official and you're going, my gosh, I can make my citizens more productive, but I've got legitimate harms to these intellectual property owners. What do I do? Well, Google, I remember the first talk, even before I was at IBM, as an employee, I was still working at Apple. They asked me to come give a talk at IBM. So I went up, gave a talk. Afterwards, they said, we'd like to hire you. But right after my talk, a kid got up and gave a talk. And he said, me and my Stanford buddy, we're trying to organize all the information in the world. And it was Google. I went out and had dinner that night with Larry Page. And I said, yeah, I know what you guys are doing. It's pretty cool. But what's your business model? So I can't talk about that. It turned out it was advertising. But the interesting thing is, I remember when I bought Google stock and I would get the annual report, and I'd look in the back of the Google annual report, it disclosed lawsuits. Lots of organizations were suing Google for copyright violation. And I knew this because the IBM lawyers, we had something better at IBM, but we couldn't use it because our IBM lawyers said, no, we can't do that, Jim. We're deep pockets. They'll come after us with all these lawsuits. So you need companies like, Microsoft's deep pockets too. But oh, guess what? OpenAI did it. We're just using it. It's them. And they start reaching away. There's all kinds of lawsuits coming in. The Google annual reports had all sorts of in there. But guess what happened? The productivity advantages of Google were so high that the Library of Congress made an exception, and Google got a copyright exemption. What's going to happen with generative AI? I don't know. It's pretty powerful technology, but there will be lawsuits. Anyway, it's fun to play with all these AI tools. I just want to say a little bit about the future, because the future is really interesting. Here's where we are right now. We got these cognitive tools that are good. They're starting to be like cognitive assistants because they don't just do one narrow thing. They can do multiple things. We're starting to collaborate with them to create stuff. If you haven't tried it, and I haven't shown you it, but you can use ChatGPT to teach you stuff. Like, I want to learn about this. And you type it in and it'll create a course for you. I'm not that good at this stuff. I'm better at that. Tailor it this way. Give me this course for somebody who knows this, not that. It's very, very good at that. And eventually it'll be a cognitive mediator. What is a cognitive mediator? Okay, this is really big. Who do you trust? Now, normally I'm talking to college kids in my university days, college kids and faculty. And the college kids would always say, I trust my mom, or I trust my dad. Or some would say, I don't trust anybody but me. I trust my wife. Why? And I have to say many times, my wife is a better negotiator than I am. So like anytime I have some complex negotiation, can't you just do it for me? You're so much better at it. You know, I'll screw it up. But I trust my wife. Some people say they trust their wife. But this cognitive mediator is when we start trusting our AI so much that we're willing to let it do things, negotiations on our behalf. That day is coming. And how will that get here? It's kind of interesting. There's this concept of a digital twin. And NVIDIA's CEO, Jensen Huang, has a digital twin of him with a 3D avatar that's kind of interesting to watch if you go out and watch the NVIDIA keynotes. But this was an article about digital twins. But a digital twin is kind of interesting because if there's enough data about you, we could start building a digital twin of you. So if the grandkids ever want to have a conversation with you after you're gone and you got a digital twin, they could do that. So digital twins are coming and we're going to start trusting them to negotiate certain things on our behalf. And this is the Rana scale right here, joke. But what could go wrong? Okay. Well, a lot could go wrong. I mean, there could be a nuclear war. That would be pretty bad. So if things go wrong, this is the thing to think about. How do we rapidly rebuild society from scratch? And I put this up here. I've been mostly optimistic through my talk. I did talk about bad actors and stuff like that, people that don't want to change. There are risks. I told you about that AI dilemma thing. But to me, this is the worst that could happen. Humanity is very resilient, but you know, some people worried the pandemic, and there may be a future pandemic that wipes out a lot of the human population. So to plan ahead, we should be thinking about how do we rapidly rebuild civilization from scratch. That's my bummer end of the talk slide. But now I have to be optimistic. And like I say, I was normally talking to students, so I'd say the best way to predict the future is to inspire the next generation of students to build it better. I know we don't have driverless cars now, but by 2035 we will. Water, this Singapore already recycles 99% of its water. There'll be no water shortages by 2035. Manufacturing, 3D printers, Elon Musk is using this in his rockets. Manufacturing is going to be local again. Energy, there's like 3 energy technologies that by 2035 will all be real. I don't know about fusion. Geothermal, yes. And the artificial leaf looks really, really good. So energy is solved by 2035. Construction, if you haven't seen this video, a 35-story building is built in 15 days. They're doing this in China. Computers are getting really, really smart. Retail goes social. Finance goes crowdfunding. Boy, it's going to be easy to get a startup funded in the future. Healthcare, 3D printed organs, all robotic surgery. Education is going to be totally transformed by artificial intelligence. You're going to have kids making discoveries, little kids making scientific discoveries. And I know we're worried about the strife in government. I'm optimistic about that. By the mathematics of how to get over so many of the problems we have is really clear. It's going to take a little while longer. And if you don't believe this, since I'm talking to an exclusively male audience here, I'll just say, some of you may even recognize who this is a picture of, Andrew Luck at Stanford a few years back. You know, the National Football League was going out of business because one or two teams started winning. You're all old enough to remember this. And it was solved, not by any advanced technology, but by changing one stupid rule, the NFL draft. The weakest team, the team that lost the most games every year, got the first draft choice. So they were able to build their capabilities faster. We are, and this is why you should read Don Norman's book on Build a Better World. We're locked into kind of a winner take all culture at the moment, but with a few simple rule changes, things can get a lot better. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions. And any questions? Yes. No, it's free if you want to use the, if you go to OpenAI, there's a free version. If you want to pay, you can. And you know, that's, you can get the higher level stuff that's better. No. If you've got a smartphone, we could have it installed on your smartphone before I walk across this room. It's easy to download. It's easy to use the free version. If you want a higher quality, you know, you can pay. You can pay for higher quality. Also, the free version, sometimes you'll go there and say, sorry, we're busy. The servers are overloaded. Too many people using us. You got to wait. So if you don't like waiting, but there is a backdoor way. Bing search in Microsoft uses GPT-4. So if you install Bing, you can sort of use GPT-4 without paying a fee. Yeah. And there's a lot of open source systems that are tiny models that will run on your, totally locally on your smartphone, totally locally on your computer. It's just they're not as good as the ones running in the cloud because they don't have as much computation. But in a few years, they should be really, really good. Yes.
Jim, I use Google Science and Wikipedia, you always get a reference list.
Yes.
Gives credit to the other sources. Can you ask ChatGPT to list source information?
You sure can, and it's wrong because it's just doing the next word. And so, you know, so many times, this is the first thing I worked on when I got it. I said, oh, this is crazy because Google Scholar is out there and Wikipedia is out there. I just have to create my prompt so that it's directing it there and I'll get the proper reference. No, it like I said, what are the 4 top references in safety engineering? I was working on a safety engineering thing that day. And I was really excited at first because it gave me the authors, the top 4 authors in this field. But the title of the book or article was wrong. It was close, but it was wrong. And the reference where it was published was wrong because it's just generating a next high probability word. It was a very probable thing. You probably heard about the lawyer who asked it to solve a case for it, went in and argued the case, and it had made up the case history. And it got called for it and fired. So you got to verify. And unfortunately, you know, Google Bard, you'd think Google, they got Google Scholar, you'd think they'd have that problem solved. No, it's still not very good. So you really have to verify. In fact, you know, that's where I spend most of my time using these tools is I don't have writer's block anymore, but my gosh, the verification task is hard. But it's easier maybe in some ways than, I don't know. It's a net plus, I think, to use the tools, but you have to verify. Stephen Wolfram has tried to do that. He's created a plugin. There's a bunch of people out there that have done it. I haven't used their stuff to see how good it is, but I'm waiting for the free version to come out. But yeah, there are people who've made attempts at it. But you'd think it'd be a lot better than it is. I'll just leave it at that. You know, if you go out and try to use it, it's awful. And
Okay, I think we have time for about one more question because our the residents council is going to meet here at 2, so we're going to have to clear this place out. But so if you have questions for Jim, please ask them now.
yes, there's one there and there's one right there. I'll go up here since.
Is there any possibility in the medical field of being able to, for instance, if a person finds a rare disease, that can be aggregated through all the medical data of the world to find out more about it?
Google has just made an announcement yesterday about their generative AI for medicine that apparently tries to do exactly what you just described. So go out and look for Google generative AI and healthcare for medicine. I haven't had a chance to read the article yet.
Regarding fair use, your presentation is informative. I've taken pictures of your slides. Is it fair use? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm an open source guy. Take it, run with it, do good things. Don't be a bad actor. That's all I ask. Yes.
If I went to my room right now, turn on the computer, what would be the best AI program?
If I went to my room right now and turned on my computer, what would be the best AI program? I really have to say, start with OpenAI, ChatGPT, and DALL-E, because they're free and it's so easy to sign up. They give you instant access. A lot of the others are better, but in different ways. Like Bard is a little bit better on the references. It is a little bit better. And it does generate multiple versions of things that you can click through in a nicer interface. But I would say start with ChatGPT and DALL-E. Those are the easiest to get started right away. And they're pretty good. They'll give you a sense of its capabilities.
Okay, I think we're going to have to wrap that up here. And now really want to thank Jim for an explanation that I had not ever seen before. This made it really clear to me where we are with this. And you have done a wonderful job for us today. Thank you. And please give him a good hand.
Thank you, Les. My pleasure.
By the way, this is on Zoom, so there should be a capability to see this again for anyone that's missed some of his points. And thank you again. And I hope to see you all again next month.
I thought that was Jason said.